The wind that morning had a strange chill to it, one that didn't quite belong to the season. It was early autumn, the leaves just beginning to turn the color of rust and gold, yet the air carried something sharper, something uneasy. I remember that because I felt it before I saw her, before I saw my daughter-in-law, Lily, standing by the lake with a suitcase at her feet. I hadn't planned to be there. The lake was a place I went when I needed quiet, a small, private spot tucked behind the birch trees on the edge of town, where my late husband and I used to sit with our fishing poles and dreams. But that morning, I wasn't fishing. I was running away from noise, from grief, from my son's silence after months of tension in their marriage. I parked a little farther than usual, not wanting anyone to see me. That's when I noticed her, the curve of Lily's shoulders, tense and sharp against the morning light. She was wearing a dark coat, hair uncombed, face pale even from a distance. And then I saw the suitcase. At first, I thought maybe she was running away. Maybe she'd finally decided to leave my son, Adam. I almost stepped forward, ready to call her name, to offer help or, if I'm honest, curiosity. But something in her movement froze me. She didn't lift the suitcase into the trunk of her car. She dragged it to the edge of the lake. And without hesitation, she shoved it in. The suitcase hit the water with a heavy splash, sinking fast. She stood there, breathing hard, watching the ripples spread until the surface was still again. My heart began to race. Lily looked around, her eyes scanning the trees as though expecting to see someone. I ducked behind the birch trunk, my hands pressed against the bark. My breath came shallow, loud in my ears. I didn't move until I heard her car door slam and the engine fade into the distance. Only then did I step out. The lake was calm again, the reflection of the sky fractured only by a faint ripple where the suitcase had gone down. I stood there, torn between fear and disbelief. What could she possibly need to throw away like that? Old clothes? Something broken? No, something about the urgency in her movements said otherwise. I walked closer, my boots crunching the fallen leaves, until I was at the edge. The water was murky, dark with silt. For a long time, I just stood there, staring at the stillness, my stomach twisting. I told myself it was none of my business. I told myself I'd imagined her panic. But that image, the way her hands trembled when she pushed the suitcase, wouldn't leave me. I drove home in silence. Adam was in the kitchen when I returned. His coffee sat untouched, and his eyes looked hollow like he hadn't slept in days. "Mom," he said when he saw me, forcing a small smile. "You're up early." "I went for a walk," I replied, setting my purse on the counter. "You look tired." He shrugged. "Just work. Work. Always work." But I'd noticed the change in him weeks ago, how he came home later, how his tone grew short when Lily's name came up. Something was unraveling between them, though neither had the courage to admit it. "Where's Lily?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "She said she was going to her friend's place. Needed some time to think." Time to think. My heart gave a nervous flutter. That night, I couldn't sleep. The image of the sinking suitcase kept haunting me. What if she'd thrown away something terrible? What if someone was missing, someone who wouldn't be found? I tried to silence the thought, but guilt is a loud companion in the dark. By dawn, I'd made up my mind. I was going back to the lake. The morning fog sat heavy over the water when I arrived, the kind that turns sound into whispers. The lake looked different now, calmer, quieter, but I could still see the faint disturbance in the water near the reeds. I'd brought a rake from the shed and a coil of rope, ridiculous tools for something so sinister, but it was all I had. I rolled up my sleeves, stepped into the shallows, and started dragging the rake across the bottom. My boots sank into the mud, the cold biting through the leather. I pulled, over and over, until the metal teeth snagged on something solid. My pulse quickened. I tugged hard. The water resisted. Another pull and the object shifted. The suitcase broke the surface with a sickening slosh, dripping lake water and sludge. My heart pounded against my ribs as I dragged it to the shore. It was heavy. Very heavy. For a long moment, I just stood there, my hands trembling. Part of me screamed to leave it closed to call someone, anyone, but another part, the mother in me, the protector, needed to know. I crouched, pressed my fingers against the latches. They were rusted but gave way easily. When I lifted the lid, a foul, earthy smell hit me. I gasped, covering my mouth. Inside, beneath a layer of wet blankets and plastic, was something that made my blood run cold. Not a body. Not yet. But baby clothes. Tiny, soaked baby clothes folded neatly and tied with a ribbon. And beneath them, a photograph, crumpled but visible. A baby. Swaddled, smiling. My knees gave out, and I sank to the ground. I knew that baby. I'd seen that face before in a frame on my son's desk, in the hospital 3 years ago. It was their daughter, Emily. But Emily had died. At least, that's what they told everyone. The funeral had been small, almost secretive. SIDS, they said, sudden infant death. I remembered holding my son as he cried, remembered Lily's hollow stare as if she were half alive herself. We buried a closed casket. I'd never asked why. Now, staring at that suitcase, every buried doubt began to claw its way back. Had Emily really died? Or was there something else? The water lapped against the shore, cold and patient. I felt dizzy, my world tilting. My son's wife had just dumped a suitcase full of their dead daughter's things into a lake. Why now, after 3 years? I looked around, half expecting someone to appear from the mist. No one did. Only the whisper of the wind and the faint creak of branches above. I zipped the suitcase shut again and dragged it to the trunk of my car. I needed answers. And I knew exactly where to start. When I reached home, Adam was gone. I waited until evening before calling him, but he didn't answer. Then I tried Lily. Straight to voicemail. By nightfall, I sat in my kitchen with the suitcase beside me, the photograph spread out on the table. I stared at the baby's smile, trying to steady my shaking hands. That's when I noticed something I hadn't before. A date scribbled faintly on the back in Lily's handwriting. June 17, 2022. But Emily had supposedly died in March. My breath caught. I looked again, closer. In the corner of the photo, just barely visible, was a hospital bracelet around the baby's wrist with a different name written on it. Not Emily. Evelyn. My stomach turned cold. Who was Evelyn? And why did she look exactly like my granddaughter? I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the suitcase again, water dripping from the corners, the photograph lying on my kitchen table like a silent accusation. Who was Evelyn? And why had Lily hidden her? By dawn, I was pacing the floor, the house filled with that unnatural silence that comes before something breaks. I tried calling Adam again, but the line went straight to voicemail. My son was a lot of things, distant, stubborn, too trusting, but not unreachable. Something was wrong. I sat down and stared at the photograph. Again, running my thumb over the baby's face. The resemblance was undeniable, she looked just like Emily, right down to the dimple near her left cheek. If not for the hospital bracelet, I would have sworn it was the same child. But that bracelet. Evelyn Grace Hawthorne, the 17th of June, 22 Memorial County Hospital. Hawthorne. Not Dawson, their last name. I picked up my car keys before I could talk myself out of it. Memorial County Hospital sat at the edge of town, a squat grey building that had seen better decades. I'd volunteered there for years after my husband died, so most of the nurses still knew me by name. When I walked in, I pasted on my warmest smile. "Morning, sweetheart," I said to the receptionist, a young woman barely out of college. "I'm looking for some information on a child who might have been born here about 3 years ago. Name's Evelyn Grace Hawthorne." The girl frowned, typing into her computer. "Are you a relative?" "Yes," I lied, forcing my voice not to tremble. "I'm her grandmother." She nodded, tapping away. "Just a moment." My heart thudded in my chest. After a minute, her brow furrowed. "I'm sorry, but I can't seem to find any record of that name. Are you sure the spelling's right?" I swallowed hard. "I'm sure." That's odd. The system doesn't show a birth under that name in June 2022. Would you like me to check for Emily Dawson instead? I froze. "No," I said quickly. "That won't be necessary." She gave me a polite nod, and I turned to leave, my pulse roaring in my ears. No record. No file. No Evelyn. But the photo existed, the bracelet, the baby, the date. It was real. Which meant someone wanted it erased. When I got home, the house felt colder. Lily's car was in the driveway. I nearly dropped my purse. She was back. Through the window, I saw her in the kitchen, sitting at the table, staring into a cup of coffee. Her face looked pale, her eyes red-rimmed. She didn't notice me standing in the doorway for a long time. When she finally looked up, there was something wild in her expression, fear, guilt, exhaustion, maybe all three. "Lily," I said softly, stepping inside. "We need to talk." Her hand tightened around the mug. "About what?" I closed the door behind me, my voice trembling. "About the lake." Her eyes widened, the color draining from her cheeks. What lake? Don't lie to me." I took a step closer. "I saw you, Lily. Yesterday morning. I saw you throw that suitcase into the water." She went utterly still. For a long moment, the only sound was the hum of the refrigerator. Then, slowly, she set the mug down. "You shouldn't have followed me," she whispered. "I had to," I said. "Because what I found." "Lily, what were you thinking? What's going on?" Her lip trembled. "You opened it." "Yes." Her eyes filled with tears. "Oh God," she covered her face with her hands, a low sob escaping her throat. "You weren't supposed to see that." I sat across from her, trying to steady my voice. "Then help me understand. Who is Evelyn?" She looked up at me then, her expression hollow like someone who had been carrying a secret too heavy for too long. She's Emily," Lily whispered. "Or at least she was supposed to be." My stomach dropped. "What does that mean?" Lily took a deep, shuddering breath. "When Emily died," she began, "I couldn't accept it. I couldn't breathe, couldn't eat, couldn't even look at her room. Adam tried to move on, but I went to a support group for grieving mothers. That's where I met her." "Met who?" "A woman named Grace Hawthorne." The name hit me like a spark. She'd just lost her baby too, a little girl named Evelyn. But unlike us, she didn't have a husband. No one to help her. She was unstable. One night after a meeting, she came to our house. She said she wanted to talk. She was holding Evelyn. She wouldn't let me hold her. She was paranoid. She said people were watching her, that someone wanted to take her baby away. Lily's hands trembled as she spoke. I tried to calm her down, but she was hysterical. She said she couldn't protect her anymore. And then, her voice broke, she left Evelyn on our porch. And she never came back. I stared at her, unable to speak. "I called Adam," she continued. "He panicked. He said we couldn't keep her, that people would think we'd stolen the baby. We should call the police. But when I looked at Evelyn, she looked just like Emily. The same hair, the same eyes. I thought maybe this was a sign that I was being given a second chance." I felt my throat tighten. "Oh, Lily," so I told him I'd take care of everything. That I'd handle it. And I did. She wiped at her tears. "I changed her name. I told everyone she was ours. That Emily had survived after all. But we couldn't keep up the lie. There were questions, the doctor, the records, people noticing little differences. So we told everyone she'd died. Again." Her voice cracked on the last word. "I buried the lie twice. Once for Emily, and once for Evelyn. I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. And the suitcase." I finally whispered. "I kept everything," Lily said softly. "Evelyn's clothes, the photo, the bracelet. I told myself I'd let it go someday, that I'd forgive myself. But every time I looked at them, I felt her eyes staring back at me, both of them. So yesterday, I went to the lake. I thought if I could let it sink, I could finally breathe." She looked up at me, her face streaked with tears. "But I couldn't. I can't. Because it wasn't just her I buried, it was the truth." I sat in silence, my heart aching in ways I didn't know it still could. Lily wasn't a monster. She was broken, shattered by grief, by guilt, by the unbearable hope that life might give back what it had taken. But still, the truth was a wound that needed to be cleaned before it festered. "Lily," I said gently, "you need to tell Adam. He deserves to know." She shook her head, panic flashing in her eyes. "No. He'll hate me. He'll never forgive me." "Then let me help you." She looked at me like a child, lost and terrified. "Why would you?" "Because," I said softly, "I know what it's like to lose someone you love and to wish for a miracle so desperately that you'd do anything to hold it. I can't judge you for that. But I can't let you drown in it, either." She broke then, collapsing into sobs as I wrapped my arms around her. For the first time, she didn't pull away. Outside, the wind howled through the trees. Inside, two women, both mothers, sat in the dim kitchen light, clinging to what little truth they had left. Later that night, after she'd gone to bed, I stood in front of the suitcase again. I should have been afraid of what it represented, but instead, I felt a strange calm. Maybe this was the beginning of something, not an ending. I looked at the photograph one last time. Beneath the pain, the confusion, there was something pure, two babies who had never meant harm. Only love, misdirected and misunderstood by the adults around them. Tomorrow, I decided, we'd go to the authorities. We'd tell them everything. It would hurt. It would take time. But the truth, no matter how dark, could still lead to light. I whispered a prayer for both children Emily and Evelyn and for Lily, who had carried the weight of both their ghosts. As I turned off the light, the house felt lighter, as if something unseen had finally exhaled. I didn't know what awaited us, but for the first time in years, I felt hope stir quietly in my chest. By morning, my resolve was clear. Lily looked like a ghost sitting at the table, pale, fragile, eyes swollen from crying. But there was something different in her expression now. Not just fear. Surrender. I called Adam, I told her quietly. Her fork froze midair. "You what?" I told him to come home. It's time he knew the truth. Her lips parted, but no words came. She stared at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly, tears gathering again. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." It wasn't forgiveness she was seeking anymore, it was relief. Adam arrived around noon, his face tight with confusion. "Mom." "Lily. What's going on?" "Your message sounded urgent." He looked between us, two women who clearly hadn't slept. The tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. I gestured for him to sit. "There's something you need to hear, Adam. And I think Lily should tell you." He frowned. "Tell me what?" Lily's hands trembled as she reached for his. "Adam, it's about Emily." His expression hardened instantly. "Lily, I told you we don't talk about that." "Not anymore. Please," she said softly. "Just listen." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Fine. But make it quick." Her voice was barely a whisper at first. She told him everything, from the night Grace appeared on their porch with Evelyn, to the decision to pretend she was Emily, to the guilt that had eaten her alive ever since. By the time she finished, her cheeks were wet, her fingers clenched around his hand as if she were holding on for dear life. Adam didn't move. His face was unreadable, pale, stiff, eyes fixed on nothing. Then he stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "This is insane," he muttered. "You expect me to believe you just took someone else's baby? Lied to everyone?" "I didn't mean to," Lily said, her voice cracking. "I was lost. I thought," he cut her off. "You thought what?" "That stealing a child would bring ours back." "Adam," I said quietly, "please. She's telling you this because she wants to make it right." He turned to me, his jaw tight. "You knew?" I hesitated. "I found out yesterday." He stared at me for a long moment, disbelief flickering into hurt. "And you didn't tell me immediately?" "I needed to understand first." "And so do you." He pressed his hands against his face, breathing hard. "Oh, God. Lily, do you have any idea what you've done?" She looked at him through tears. "I didn't take her, Adam. Grace left her. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to protect her. By pretending she was ours." His voice cracked. "By letting me mourn a child who might still be alive somewhere." That sentence hit the air like a blade. Lily froze. "What?" Adam looked up slowly. If Evelyn was left with us, and we told people Emily was dead, what if they're not the same child? What if Emily didn't die? I felt my pulse quicken. Lily shook her head. No, we buried her. But Adam was already moving. Did we? The hospital never showed us the body. You said you couldn't handle seeing her, remember? We trusted them. He turned to me, desperation flashing in his eyes. Mom, what if there was a mistake? What if Adam, I interrupted softly, slow down. We need proof. He nodded, pacing now, mind spinning faster than his words could follow. The hospital. We'll start there. We'll get Emily's records, find Grace Hawthorne, anything. I could see the storm inside him, the mix of anger, hope, and fear tearing through his chest. Lily sat motionless, whispering to herself. No, she's gone. Emily's gone, but none of us were sure anymore. That afternoon, we drove back to Memorial County Hospital. The same young receptionist was there, and this time, Adam's impatience took over. We're looking for the records of 2 infants, he said sharply. Emily Dawson and Evelyn Hawthorne. Born in early and mid-2022. We need everything you have. The girl blinked, clearly startled by his intensity. Sir, I can't just. Adam slammed his palm on the counter. Please. It's urgent. She glanced nervously at me, then nodded. I'll call the supervisor. Within minutes, an older nurse arrived, one I recognized. Adam Dawson, she said gently. I remember you. I was there, when Emily passed. Adam's voice was tight. Were you? Then maybe you can explain why my daughter's death certificate doesn't match the hospital's record of her birth. Her eyes flickered with something unreadable. I'm not sure what you mean. He handed her a copy of the document he'd pulled from his files. This says she died March 9th. But your system lists a discharge on March 10th, marked as transfer. Transfer where? The nurse hesitated, glancing toward the office doors. Adam, maybe you should sit down. My stomach turned cold. What transfer? He repeated, voice rising. She sighed. There was confusion that night. The power outage, the storm. A few newborns were moved temporarily to another facility for monitoring. But when the records were reconciled later, one of them was listed as deceased. I thought it was corrected, but her voice trailed off. Adam stared at her, speechless. You're saying Emily might have been switched? The nurse didn't answer, which said everything. I'll pull the archived files, she murmured finally. But you didn't hear this from me. We waited in silence for nearly an hour. When she returned, she carried a thin folder. This is all I can show you. Inside was a single transfer slip, dated March 9th, 2022. Infant female, unconfirmed ID, transferred to Grace Hawthorne. My breath caught. Lily's hand flew to her mouth. Grace. She worked here, the nurse said quietly. Part-time in the maternity ward. She left the hospital suddenly right after that night. No one's seen her since. The room spun around me. Grace Hawthorne hadn't just lost a baby. She'd taken one. Emily. That night, the 3 of us sat in stunned silence around my living room. The air felt too heavy to breathe. So all this time, Adam whispered. Emily might still be alive. Lily shook her head slowly, her voice breaking. No. That can't be. Evelyn, she was real. She was with us. Adam looked at her sharply. And if she was our Emily? If Grace switched them? Lily pressed her face into her hands. Then I buried my own daughter twice. The words hit me like a physical blow. I reached across the table, taking her cold hand. Lily, listen to me. You didn't know. None of us did. But now we have a chance to find the truth, to find her. Adam's eyes hardened with determination. We're going to the police. We'll show them everything, the suitcase, the photograph, the records. They can reopen the case. For the first time since this nightmare began, something flickered inside me, a fragile, dangerous thing called hope. The next few days passed in a blur of interviews, paperwork, and waiting. The police reopened both cases, Emily Dawson's death and the disappearance of Grace Hawthorne. They recovered the suitcase from my trunk as evidence, photographed everything, and promised to contact nearby hospitals. But each passing day without answers gnawed at us. Lily barely slept. Adam threw himself into calls and searches. I tried to keep the house steady, to hold them together when the weight of what we'd learned threatened to pull them apart. Then, on the 5th day, the call came. Detective Harris's voice was calm but heavy. "Mrs. Dawson, we think we've found something." We traced an old patient record matching Grace Hawthorne's ID, a woman admitted under an alias 2 years ago. She was living under a different name in a small town about 200 miles away. "And," I whispered. "She had a child with her," he said. "A little girl. We'd like you and your son to come down for verification." The world seemed to stop. Adam's hand tightened around mine. Lily stood frozen, tears spilling silently down her face. I didn't dare speak, afraid that if I did, the fragile hope might shatter before it could reach us. That night, I stared at the reflection of the lake through my window. The water was calm again, still and silver under the moonlight. 3 weeks ago, I'd watched my daughter-in-law throw a suitcase into that water, believing she was burying her past. Now I knew she was unknowingly trying to drown the truth that refused to stay buried. Tomorrow, we'd drive out to that small town. Tomorrow, we might find out whether our granddaughter, the little girl we'd all mourned, was still out there somewhere, waiting to come home. And for the first time in years, I prayed not for peace, but for courage. Because sometimes, the truth doesn't set you free. It makes you strong enough to face what comes next. We drove in silence. The highway stretched before us like an endless grey ribbon, slicing through fields of autumn gold and distant hills. The sun hadn't fully risen yet, just a faint blush on the horizon, but inside the car, the air felt tense and electric. Adam sat behind the wheel, his jaw clenched tight, eyes fixed straight ahead. Lily sat in the back seat beside me, her hands twisted together, lips moving soundlessly, prayers or apologies, I couldn't tell which. We'd been on the road for hours. The detective had given us an address, a modest foster home in a small town called Maple Ridge. That was where they'd found her. The child. Emily, or Evelyn. I didn't even know what name to hold in my heart anymore. When we arrived, the detective met us at the gate. Detective Harris was a tall man with kind eyes that didn't fit his line of work. He spoke softly, as if afraid to break something fragile. "She's safe," he said. "Healthy. The foster family has taken good care of her. But this has to be handled carefully, she's been through a lot of confusion." "Where's Grace?" Adam asked. Harris sighed. "She passed away last year. Car accident. No ID found at the time, but dental records confirmed her identity last month. The girl's been in the system since then. We didn't connect her to you until we reopened the case." Lily covered her mouth with her hand, tears welling in her eyes. "She's gone." I felt a strange pang of sorrow for the woman I'd never met, Grace, whose grief had twisted her into both kidnapper and mother. In her own broken way, she'd loved that child too. "Would you like to see her?" Harris asked gently. Adam's voice broke. "Yes. Please." The foster mother, a warm woman named Susan, led us to the backyard. The air smelled faintly of apples and grass. And there she was. A little girl with chestnut curls, sitting cross-legged beneath a tree, drawing something on a scrap of paper. The morning sun caught the strands of her hair, turning them gold. For a heartbeat, the world stopped. Adam's breath hitched. Lily made a sound between a sob and a prayer. The child looked up, curious, cautious, her green eyes wide. And in that moment, I saw it. The dimple near her left cheek. The same one Emily had. It was her. Even before the detective confirmed it, before the tests or the papers, I knew. A mother doesn't forget. A grandmother never does. "Her name's been Evelyn since she came here," Susan said softly. "But she responds to both. She's a bright, sweet girl. Loves to draw." I stepped forward slowly, afraid of startling her. "Hi, sweetheart," I said gently. "That's a beautiful picture you're making." She looked at me shyly, then held it up. A lake. With a tree beside it. And a woman standing near the edge. "It's the place from my dream," she said. I felt my knees weaken. Your dream? She nodded. I see it sometimes when I sleep. A lady by the water. She's sad, but she's not mean. She just wants to find something. Tears blurred my vision. I reached out and brushed a lock of hair from her face. You're very brave, you know that. She smiled, small, hesitant. Are you the lady from the dream? No, sweetheart, I whispered. But maybe I was looking for you too. The rest of the day passed in fragments, paperwork, interviews, DNA samples. The authorities were cautious but kind. Everything pointed to what we already knew. The little girl was Emily Dawson. Grace had taken her during the chaos of the storm, believing she was saving her after the hospital's power outage had separated infants during transfer. When she realized her mistake, she couldn't bear to return her. Instead, she raised Emily as Evelyn, hiding from everyone, even herself. It wasn't evil, it was desperation, grief twisted into love. By sunset, the officials allowed us to spend time with Emily in the garden. Lily sat across from her, unable to stop crying. Adam knelt beside them, his hand trembling as he reached out. Emily, he said softly, do you remember this? He pulled a tiny silver locket from his pocket, one that had belonged to her since birth. Inside was a photo of him holding her as a baby. Her little brows furrowed as she opened it. For a long moment, she studied the picture. Then she looked up at him. You were in my other dream, she said simply. Adam choked out a laugh that turned into a sob. He pulled her gently into his arms, holding her like something holy. Lily's tears flowed freely now, her hands trembling as she touched Emily's curls. I thought I lost you, she whispered. I thought I buried you. Emily just leaned into her touch, small arms wrapping around her mother's neck. Don't cry, she said. I'm here. And just like that, the years of guilt, pain, and silence began to melt, not all at once, but enough for light to filter through. That night, as we drove home, Emily slept in Lily's lap, her tiny hand clutching her mother's fingers. Adam's eyes glistened as he glanced at the rearview mirror, catching my gaze. Thank you, Mom, he said quietly. For what? For not letting us bury the truth. I smiled faintly. Some things stay underwater for a while, Adam. But the current always brings them back. He nodded, the weight in his voice lighter than it had been in years. Outside, the stars glimmered across the night sky, reflected faintly in the windshield. I watched as the trees passed in a blur, the same ones I'd driven through the day I saw Lily at the lake. The lake that once held a suitcase full of sorrow now felt like something else entirely. A grave, yes, but also a beginning. Because from that darkness, something precious had surfaced. Months passed. The investigation concluded quietly. Grace's actions were ruled as kidnapping driven by trauma, not malice. Emily was officially restored to our family, her name reclaimed, her story rewritten with truth instead of silence. Lily started therapy, slowly rebuilding herself. Adam changed jobs, choosing to work closer to home. And I found peace in the simple act of watching my granddaughter chase butterflies in the garden. One afternoon, as we sat by the lake again, this time together, Emily pointed to the water. Is that where the lady in my dream went? She asked. I smiled, my eyes misting. Maybe. But I think she found what she was looking for. What was that? I looked at her, bright-eyed, alive, the living proof that even the deepest loss can lead to light. Forgiveness, I said softly. And home. She smiled, then leaned her head against Lily's shoulder. The breeze stirred the water, gentle and golden in the fading sun. And as I watched the ripples spread across the surface, I realized something: the lake hadn't taken anything from us. It had only hidden what we weren't yet ready